the last year or so, while I've still been buying vinyl, I haven't really had the opportunity to listen to it because I've had various problems with my ears. Well, those are almost cleared up at the moment, so I finally got some vinyl out, put it on the turntable, and it just wasn't sounding right. There was a strange rumble sound. So I had a look at the stylus, and sure enough, that's where the problem lies. As you can see, there's a kink in it, but if you look at the bottom, it's almost been torn off. There's definitely a split in the metal there. So I went looking for a replacement stylus. I found that they're very hard to get hold of. I've got an Autofon LM30 cartridge on this one, which came with the turntable. It was a second-hand turntable. But the stylus, very expensive, very hard to get hold of, no longer really manufactured. Anyway, I found a new old stock one on eBay, which was the whole cartridge, including the stylus. I took the stylus off that, put it on my one, and it sounded okay, but only okay. It definitely still doesn't have that rich analog vinyl sound that I'm expecting. I seem to recall that when I used to listen to records through this hybrid valve amp, they used to sound an awful lot richer. Maybe that was down to the valves, I thought. Well, if my current amp, which is a Pioneer SX3600, just isn't up to the task, it's going to have to be replaced. I mean, it is a really nice vintage amp from the early 80s, but maybe it's just too long in the tooth. Now, the reason that I like this amp is because it's got tape inputs and outputs, which I need for all my equipment, but it's also got a phono input, which is something you don't tend to get on modern amps. Of course, at one point, all amplifiers would have a phono input, but they took them off when the CDs took off, and I think maybe they'll need to put them back on again now with the recent vinyl resurgence. Anyway, I do have another amp in my setup already to try out. This Sony HAP-S1, I'm using it as a digital music player jukebox. However, it does have a built-in amplifier, so I can put things into this and play them through my speakers. So I wired the speakers up into this instead of the other amp, and then I need to plug the turntable into this. Because the Sony is a modern and compact device, it doesn't have a dedicated phono input on the back. To be able to plug a turntable into this, you need to use a phono preamp. Now, I managed to find my old preamp in a drawer, and this is something that you unfortunately need to plug into a wall again, so that's one more power supply needed. However, you plug your turntable into one side, output comes out of there into your auxiliary ins on your amplifier, and when I plugged it into the Sony, the turntable sounded a heck of a lot better than it did when I was using the built-in phono stage on my old vintage Pioneer amp. But before I could make a decision as to whether to dump the Pioneer amp or not, I thought I'll do a bit of comparison tests. I played some music back from the Sony's hard drive, it's lossless music, played it back over the speakers, played through the Sony, and then tried the same music played into the Pioneer amp through the speakers attached to the Pioneer, and they both sounded great. So that meant the problem wasn't with the whole amp, it's purely with the phono preamp built into the Pioneer. Now, it's not as simple as just using that preamp that I've been testing out, because unfortunately it's always had a bit of a hum on it. I've never been able to sort it out however much I grounded it, so that's one of the reasons I stopped using it. I decided to give my vinyl and myself a bit of a treat. After all, I haven't had stereo hearing for the last few months, and I don't know how long it's going to last, so I decided to combine the valves with the preamp, and I've gone and got myself a Project Tube Box S. Now, it was a real treat as well, because this thing cost me about 300 UK pounds, so that makes it one of the most expensive hi-fi components I've ever bought, so let's hope it performs really well. Looking in the box here, we've got the power adapter here. Notice this is multi-voltage, 100 to 240 volts, output 18 volts at 1 amp. It comes with a Euro plug as well as a US style, and of course the UK one, which is the one I'm going to use. And as you'd expect, those just clip into the adapter there, and as you can see, makes quite a bit of a big plug to stick out of your wall. On the end of the wire here, we've got a barrel plug. Taking the Tube Box S out of its bag, I was surprised to find that it was black on top. I thought this was an all silver device. Now, on the front we've got a silver plate, and on there's a momentary push switch and a small LED. On the top you can see the two valves sticking up. Those are surrounded by those metal rings so that you can't accidentally break them, and of course you could remove those with those Allen keys if you needed to replace the valves at any point. On the back we've got the inputs and the outputs as well as the power, and on the left here we've got a little screw which is where you attach your ground wire. Looking at the base of the device, as well as having 4 rubber feet on it, we've also got some dip switches. Now those dip switches have to be set according to the cartridge that you're using on your turntable. There's instructions, of course, in the printed paper manual for that, and it'll give you ideas about what you have to change to do it. It looks quite complicated, but handily they put some typical examples here. And when I check the specs of my particular cartridge out via the very helpful website Vinyl Engine, I found that the specifications for mine match the middle example here. So all I need to do is adjust the dip switch number 6 into the up position on both the left and right stereo. So we should be ready to go. However, before we do, I just want to test it out, see that it actually powers up. So yes, the blue light comes on the front, and then just looking at the tubes, you can see both of those have a faint orange glow about them, so everything looks fine. However, I did notice that the power supply lead was particularly short, in my opinion. It's only 1.5 meters long, which is approximately 5 feet, which I think is a little bit stingy. They could do with giving another meter on that. Anyway, plugging it into my hi-fi now. That's the outputs going to the amp. These are the inputs coming from the turntable, and then this is the earth lead, again coming from the turntable and screwed into the terminal there. So just putting it back in position, I'll change the record to one that I recall as having a particularly good quality rich sound to it. So I'll put that on, turn on the amplifier and press start on the turntable. Now, I'm not going to be playing you the music that I'm listening to because it sounded terrible once I'd recorded it with my camera. However, in person it sounded exactly how I wanted. I'd finally got that rich vinyl quality back that I was expecting all along. Now, whether I could have done it cheaper than the Tube Box S, we'll never know, because I decided to get the Tube Box S, but it produces the exact results that I wanted, so I'm happy. I'm getting the sound quality back that I remember as having a few years ago. And that just leaves me one job left to do, and that's to label up the switch box with an input for the turntable, because of course I'm not using the phono input anymore on the amplifier. Other than, of course, the financial cost, I suppose the only other downsides to adding the Tube Box S into my system are that there's yet another device plugged into the power, and there's another step in the process of playing back a record. But that was already quite convoluted. Let me show it to you now. The first thing you have to do is turn on the power to the entire hi-fi, then turn on the amplifier. Make sure that the auxiliary input is selected. Go to the switch box and select vinyl. Turn on the Tube Box S. Turn on the record player. Pick a record and carefully remove it from its sleeve. Put it on the turntable, and finally you can press play. I suppose given the number of steps in that process, adding one more by having to turn on a phono preamp isn't really going to kill me. But of course it's worth it for the improved sound quality I'm getting. Some of the records that I had before that sounded thin or harsh now sound richer and warmer. They're not muffled though, I've got more detail in them, I can hear more things than I could before. It's a really nice, clean, warm analog sound. Now if you want to get hold of a Tube Box S, there's links up in the video description, but that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.